Hi, welcome to Here to There, hosted by Carolyn Takeda, former attorney, current small groups pastor, and life coach. Through monthly conversations with pastors, authors, and guests, we hope to stir your thoughts and encourage you to move from where you are to where you want to be, in your personal life, in your leadership, or in your ministry.
Welcome to Group Talk. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Carolyn Takeda, your host and the small groups pastor at Calvary Community Church in Westlake Village, California. Well, one of the biggest growing trends in churches over the last 10 to 20 years probably has been the multi-site model. And a multi-site church is simply a church that's one church, but they meet in multiple locations. And it actually started out initially out of necessity because a church outgrew its meeting space. But then it really took on and became a very popular, fast-growing model, and it's catching on all around the world. And in 2014, it was reported that there were 8,000 multi-site churches just in the United States that had over 5 million congregants, which is a big chunk of the people here. And so this model initially looked like maybe would it last, would not last. Clearly, it's here to stay. And much has been written, discussed, and debated about these multi-site churches, the pros, the cons, what they're doing well or not. And we will not be discussing any of that today. But instead, we're going to focus on some unique challenges that multi-site models present for those working in small groups ministry. And whether you lead from the central campus or one of the satellite campuses, whether you have a really flexible model or a franchise model or whatever it is, there are some tools that you can get that help you manage that well when it comes to groups ministry. And for those of us, like myself, who does not work in a multi-site environment, I want to encourage you not to turn off the podcast yet, because not only do I have a fantastic guest, but there's some relevant ministry principles to consider, even if you're not on a multi-site thing, just related to ministry, and things for us to think through. And so this conversation may be useful for that, as well as maybe down the road, you guys have been toying around with the idea of setting up a second campus, and it'd be good to know what some of those pitfalls might be going forward. So stay tuned. And with me on the program today is Pastor Jason Williams, who is an expert on the multi-site church model. I just called you an expert, Jason, so you're going to have to come through.
That's a lot of pressure, Carolyn.
I have no doubt you can meet it. He has years of experience running small groups ministry in that context, and I really look forward to learning from him. So welcome, Jason, and thanks for being on the program.
My pleasure, Carolyn. Thanks for having me, and hello to everyone out there who's listening.
Yeah, so Jason is a Texan born and bred, and he has an MBA from the University of Texas at Dallas and has worked for 10 years in oil and gas and healthcare industry in the IT area. His degree is in computer science way back when. And then he became part of the Chase Oaks church staff in Plano, Texas for 8 years as part of their executive team, their teaching team, and had responsibility for group ministry across all campuses. And then he led one of the campuses, the primary one, and then also launched a third new campus. At which point, I suppose, after a little while, then in the fall of 2016, Steve Gladen got his way and Jason joined the Saddleback staff. And has been serving almost a year now as the campus group's development pastor. And of course, we know Saddleback has been doing multi-site for many years. I believe they started in 2010, so about 7 years. And Jason, how many satellite campuses do they have now?
18 currently, 14 in SoCal, 4 overseas, and we'll be launching the 19th on December 1st. So, yeah, a lot of balls to juggle.
That's a lot. And you are actively involved in leading and developing leaders and groups ministry in all 18, now up to be 19 campuses?
This is true, yes.
So
yes,
I've got why you are the expert. Wow, that is a lot.
It is. It's a ton of fun, though. Great group of guys and gals that we get to work with at all those campuses. It's a lot of fun.
It means that you're very good at reading different cultural contexts, especially international ones. So that
what I'm getting better. Yeah, for sure. I made trips to Berlin and to Hong Kong last year, and this year I'm going to try to hit Argentina and the Philippines to visit those. So yeah, I'm getting better at reading cultural settings.
We were just saying offline that he needs to convince Saddleback to plant a campus in Hawaii so he and his wife can go and enjoy a vacation there.
My wife would take that trip with me in a heartbeat.
Somehow some of the other ones, maybe not as much, but yes. Well, Jason, let's start off by clarifying what we mean by multi-site. There's a variety of approaches, right? So how would you describe and kind of characterize them, maybe in some broad strokes for us?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think when you're talking about multi-site, you've got two poles to the conversation. You've got you got one pole is kind of like high control, limited campus autonomy, more of like the franchise model. And then on the other side of it, the other extreme, the other pole would be high campus autonomy. The campus is largely functioning as an independent organization with limited central control. So I think you see churches fall on either of those poles, but more commonly, people are somewhere on that continuum between them. There's a lot of room in between, and some people are sevens, some people are threes on that 1 to 10 scale, just depending on how they're coming down on how much control they want to exert versus how much freedom and flexibility they want to give to the campuses.
So if we were to flesh that out, so say the more high control, so the franchise model you called it, that would be when you pipe in a video teaching from the main campus?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and the video teaching is an element, sure. Yeah, so I think you would control the teaching through a video element, but then even all the systems, all of the branding, all of the communications, that's going to fall in that continuum somewhere too. I mean, some churches, they do the same video announcements at every one of their campuses, for example. Okay. It's not just a message, but it's announcements. The flyer shell is the same. So yeah, there are multiple pieces to it, but certainly the video teaching element would be one of them.
Okay, and then on the flip side, on the other end of the flexibility, each campus would be autonomous, have their own teaching pastor, have their own communications and centralized things. So if you translate that to groups ministry, what would it look like, say, on the 1 and the 10?
Yeah, I think on the 10, if it's high control, then you're going to have the same assimilation approach at every campus, regardless of its size. You're going to have all the same branding elements. You're going to have all the same marketing pieces. You're going to have the same displays in your connection areas. Everything. If you showed up at one campus and you showed up at another, the experience, you'd be like, wow, this is deja vu because it looks exactly like the other one I was at. Now, if you're on the one, the only thing that may be the same may be the overarching philosophy of groups ministry and maybe a logo or something. And then everything else may be much more diverse and much more unique from campus to campus. I think that would be kind of what you would see from a low control kind of environment.
And so for your experience personally, Jason, with Chase Oaks and with Saddleback, are both of those models tend to be heavier on the control side, or were they different?
Yeah, so I think there's a fairly typical life cycle that happens. I think when you launch campuses at the beginning, you're just trying to figure out how to make this thing. I mean, what have we done? This right. Suddenly I've got this level of complexity that I didn't anticipate, and I just don't want this thing to crater. So let's get this thing done. So I think they start very autonomous and entrepreneurial, and then over time you start to see like fractures in the model. We've talked about it, you and I. I think you can fake it for a while when you go from one campus to two, and you can kind of just keep doing the same things that you've always done, and that'll work for a while, but you'll start to see little hairline cracks in what you're doing. And when you launch that third campus, it's kind of a forcing mechanism. So I think then you start to get serious about systems. You start to get serious about some of this, some consistency, some alignment issues and such. So I think they start more autonomous and more entrepreneurial, but then out of necessity over time, they trend to be higher control and a little bit more towards that franchise model is what I've experienced in the two places that I've been in.
That makes sense too, because if you're going to get bigger, because you then do need structures, right? Then why duplicate it? Why reinvent the wheel? There's some economies of scale happening. So then it makes more sense to use the resources of the main campus. It's just better stewardship probably than to recreate it for every single campus. So then I can see how it would drift towards that. That makes sense.
Right. And that's what I always tell our guys. It's like, look, hey guys, there are a few things that we want to look at and maybe tighten up and get a little more consistent. Now that's not to squelch your creativity and your ability to dream and envision things, but it is to let's be good stewards. Let's not be doing the same thing 19 times. Let's not be writing the same emails or creating the same tchotchkes or doing this. Let's be good stewards. Let's build some teams of people who can help do this for all of the campuses, and let's be a little bit more efficient in the way that we operate. So yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Then what about, can we push back on that for a little bit? Yeah. So then what about the cultural context though? Like if you make it so consistent like a franchise, right? So McDonald's in China is exactly like a McDonald's here kind of idea. Then might you be missing in terms of the specific context and culture and community where God's planted that particular next church?
Yeah, I think even in the highest control environments, you have to leave wiggle room for that. Otherwise, you're not going to get leaders at those campuses, and you need leaders at those campuses. So I think one of the key elements to this conversation is figuring out what needs to be the same, and where are those areas of freedom, and making sure that people at the campuses know very clearly where those areas of freedom are, so that they have those places to innovate, they have those places to contextualize, to your point, because each campus is unique. And so for us at both Chase Oaks and at Saddleback, those areas of freedom have a lot to do with community engagement. I mean, how are we going to engage the community around us? We do very little other than say, hey, it's a need. Let's do this. Let's make sure that we're actively engaging our community. And what that looks like, we don't put a whole lot of parameters on that, because that's a place where you've got to be able to contextualize. I think campuses, from a size standpoint and their facilities, some campuses can do these really awesome connection events and assimilation type things like the group links and other stuff. Some campuses can't. So they've got to be able to flash and introduce the campus is small, so they can say, hey, we've got these three people who are starting groups. They're out in the lobby in the connection area. Go by and say hi and ask them a little bit about their group. Well, we can't do that at Lake Forest here. But we can do that at Aliso Viejo, which meets at a high school and has about 400 people at it. So those areas, we got to define those clearly, and then give them the opportunity to flex those creative and innovative muscles, or else they'll get a little bit tired of the role and feel like a caddy more than a leader.
Yeah, I love that. As you were talking, Jason, I was thinking, even a non-multi-site environment, just in a one church environment and one campus, we get that question a lot in terms of our small group leaders. If you have more than two leaders, you're going to have to know what parts to control, and what really matters. So, for example, that might be the requirements to be a leader. That has to be the same across the board. And it could be a low bar or high bar, whatever your church decides is a requirement. So that would be the same. However, how they meet, when they meet, where they meet, how long they meet, all of those things are things you can flex with based on their schedule, who's in their group, how they do childcare. There's tons of space for them to figure out their context and to feel valued and supported from the leadership in doing so. But then we have to hold really tightly the stuff that matters to us, which is things like qualification for leadership. Exactly.
And I love what you said there, because I think when those things pop up and people innovate, I think in a high control environment, the tendency is to ask why questions. And I know you and I were just at a place where somebody taught us, hey, replace why questions with what questions. And I think that's important, because as you've got campuses and as you've got people innovating and doing things, instead of asking them why, because it threatens the model and it threatens the control if you're on the high control side, to ask what was it that prompted them to do that, and then to celebrate that and seek to bring that in and make that a part of the innovation across all campuses that can be shared. I spend a lot of time thinking about that and how to do that with our guys here at Saddleback.
Oh, that's cool. All right, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of this. Yeah. So if you have a satellite campus, what's the best way to go about building a group's ministry? Like, for example, do you have to have a strong main campus structure first, or can you start out and experiment with a smaller campus?
Yeah, no, I think it helps to have a strong main campus and to have that be a part of the DNA, because you're not going to be dealing with headwinds at that campus. You're going to have them at your back and pushing you along. But I don't think that's necessarily a deal breaker if you don't. I think if you are a passionate groups person and you find yourself at a campus and you feel like you're kind of pushing things upstream, I think you're a gift to that church, for one, and I think there's a way to very graciously sort of lead up and out to the primary campus. But I do think it helps. If you can begin with a clear mandate from that main campus, and it's part of the DNA already, certainly that carries a lot of weight. So would you recommend that?
Okay, so let's say you're in a church that values small groups and has a healthy and a established small groups ministry. So then you start off other campuses, campus 3, campus 4. Then would your second or third hire be a small groups person, or would you prefer to have the campus pastor own the small group piece? Does it matter?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think it is healthy at the beginning for a campus pastor to own groups, especially if you're a church of groups, not a church with groups, because the only way that you're going to replicate that DNA is for the campus pastor not to see groups as something tangential to what they're doing, but as core and critical to the health and the vibrancy of that campus. So I actually love it. And we start here without a groups person because it forces a couple things. One, it forces total ownership by that campus pastor of groups. But then it also starts them on the journey of building out a team of really committed and faithful groups people. So they're looking, they're leading groups, but they're from the very beginning looking for key volunteers and key leaders that they can pull in, that even once you hire that person, end up serving as sort of a part of a strategic team for groups at that campus that feels a level of investment that maybe a typical coach or somebody might not, because they've sort of run it on a volunteer basis in conjunction with the campus pastor. So I love the campus pastor beginning doing it. But then, our first hire after an attendance trigger is hit is a groups person to step in, because it quickly, if the campus is growing, groups are exploding and expanding. It becomes untenable pretty quickly. So the first attendance trigger for us is hiring a groups person that can give that some more focused attention.
What would be the numerical trigger for Saddleback?
For Saddleback, it's 500.
Okay.
Yeah, 500 attendees at the campus. Yeah.
So, so the main campus, say, already has a groups pastor or groups person. So then that person acts as a resource then for the campus pastor until they hit that trigger?
Yes. So that's, you've touched on another question, which is sort of central team versus the campus autonomy. So the way it started for us both at Chase Oaks and at Saddleback was the person at the first campus, the larger primary campus, sort of serves as a group's champion across the first few campuses. They're functioning in a pseudo-central role and offering support to that campus pastor, to the volunteer that they may bring into that role. And then what happens over time as the number of campuses grows is that person in that pseudo role struggles, one because of bandwidth, but two, another pitfall of that approach is that person is deeply committed and it dates back to before the first campus was ever launched. They're deeply committed to that main campus. So they're always going to be thinking through the grid of the large campus they've always been a part of. And it's a real struggle for that person to step up above that and to offer the kind of leadership that you need to all the campuses, whether they're a campus of 200 or 300 or a campus of 20,000. So I think that works. Again, that's one of those things that I think you could do the first campus or so, but then once you get beyond that, you start to see that become a major issue where you have to really start thinking, all right, I probably need somebody above all campuses in a central role to be able to think not through the lens of one campus out to the others, but even above that and see all campuses equally to the extent
and that's pretty much why you're at Saddleback. This is your role.
That's exactly my role. Yes.
So how do you ever get, okay, you can be honest here, but do you ever
okay,
get,
I will. I'll stay.
Yes, we don't know if Steve ever listens to these, so here we are. But do you ever get kind of an us versus them mentality? Is that why you need someone that's kind of float above all of that?
Absolutely. If that person, that champion, is connected to a campus, it's real easy to view them as out of touch with what's happening at your campus. And I spend a lot of time thinking about that and trying to manage to that, because it's an easy thing to set in. I don't want ever our guys to think that I'm in an ivory tower and up on high pushing stuff out to them. I want to involve them in every conversation that I can. Anytime we're talking about strategic direction for groups, I want somebody, at least two people from regional campuses at that table. There'll be a group of people from Lake Forest for sure, but we've got to have people from the regional campuses there. Just saw recently a breakdown in this that causes some heartburn that I'll share with you. We were putting together this little kit that we were going to use at campuses, and as is often the case at Saddleback, it was something that came up kind of late in the game, the need for it. And we only had a limited amount of time to do it. And so a group from Lake Forest just gathered some people. They put this thing together and said, all right, here we go, handed it to the campuses. Mm-hmm. Well, campuses says, hey, wait, hold on a second. I've got to store this. I don't have any room to store this. Oh, wait, you want me to pay for it? And it's I think it was like $9 or $10 a piece, and we need hundreds of them. I don't have that in my budget. Oh, wait, I don't like this. And because, and some of the I don't like, it was valid. I don't want to say it was invalid, but you could hear in listening to the person talk, the real issue was I wasn't involved in this conversation.
Yes, so they don't feel valued.
Was involved in this conversation, and you're pushing this on me without any opportunity to speak into it. And we had to unwind that and go back. So that's why everything we do, when I'm in a meeting, if someone says, yeah, we're working on this, I'm like, hey, are there any regional guys in that conversation? We're talking about training hosts in a new way. Are there any regional guys helping you shape that? No. Well, here, I'm going to walk out of here. I'm going to call a couple guys. When's your next meeting? Okay, great. Let's all of us get together and talk about that. So I think that's a key thing that we got to constantly think about in order to keep that us versus them mentality from creeping in. It's a big one. It's a big deal.
That's a great example. It seems like you probably spent a lot of time, Jason, in coaching and mediating between the two. Yeah,
I do. I feel like that's a big part of my value is that I can, and they've told me, the regional guys have told me, hey, I feel like instead of being given orders, I'm invited into the conversation. And for me, there's nothing that's more music to my ears than that, because I passionately and fervently believe that we is way better than me. And it doesn't matter who the me is, the we. And I tell the regional guys all the time, our church and the kingdom is better for your involvement, not just at your campus, but for things we're doing across all of our campuses. And so I try to facilitate those all the time.
That's so wise. I think getting buy-in by having them have a seat at the table. Again, an application for that, even on one campus, is really saying, hey, we're doing this teaching series. What do you think about, how we might do this with small groups, or, how can, and ask for it. And people just feel so honored. They just want to be part of the conversation. They may not have, and it really does save a lot of heartburn later, because you're not dealing with resistance.
It's a great moment in our monthly meetings when I will very specifically and intentionally say, hey, I just want to real quick thank Brandon and Jim for just this last week. They were in a meeting and helped us put this together. Because the reality is I can't get all 19 to that table.
Right.
But if those guys hear one of our guys in this room,
exactly,
then they're like, okay, great. It's we've had a voice. So yeah, and then those guys feel great because we've applauded them for their contribution to the overall strategy and movement of what's happening in the church.
Right, and they feel heard by you. You're like their rep, so that helps. So that us versus them mentality, the needing to get ownership, buy-in by valuing and inviting. What are some other dangers or pitfalls with the multi-site groups ministry that's challenging?
Communication. I think for one, I think organizationally, and this dates back to my corporate experience in our church, almost every problem that we encounter in organizations of any kind is a matter of communication. The more complex an organization gets, the more communication breakdowns you can have. And so one of the things the guys here, I've been here a year, and the guys say, man, I'm so glad you're here. You've helped us so much, And I'm like, gosh, it doesn't feel like I've done a whole lot. But I step back from that and realize what I have done is dramatically increase the level of communication. The guys don't get surprised by things. I think
that's huge.
People do not like to be surprised. And they don't like somebody coming up to them at their campus and asking them about something they feel like they should know the answer to. And they feel like the only person who doesn't know that answer. So I think communication, we communicate. I communicate over and over and over again. And I do not think in a central role in a multi-site environment, I'm not sure it's possible to over communicate, quite honestly. So I think communication, and then kind of related to that, and the whole idea of the seat at the table, even from a meeting standpoint, I gather the regional guys once a month, but I also I make sure that someone, at least one, maybe two people from Lake Forest are at that meeting. Because I want us all at the table together, not the mothership pushing out over here. So we have those conversations. I sit in on any meeting related to groups that Lake Forest has to keep that drift from happening, to where we kind of get back to the place where we're operating autonomously at Lake Forest and patting the regionals on the head out there, telling, hey, go for it. So I think alignment, keeping us together, keeping us in the conversation. I think there are all kinds of communication issues that arise that we can't we can't communicate enough to overcome.
Yeah, and if that's probably your statement about everything kind of boiling down to communication in your organization, I think that's so true. And it doesn't matter if you're a church of 100 or 10,000. It all boils down to individuals and whether they feel valued, whether they are communicated with clearly and not surprised. Those are good ones.
My wife's a counselor, and this is a random sidebar, but she taught me years ago, hey, you got to stay in conversation long enough to get to the third or fourth level, because the first thing that someone tells you is never the issue. You have to communicate, ask questions to get down to what the real issue is. And that's where, like that one issue, they were complaining about certain aspects of the box, but you get down 3 layers and it's, hey, you didn't communicate with me, and I wasn't heard and involved. So it's huge.
And what about if you were going to hire someone that would be in your campus 3, 4, etc. Say you're ready, you've hit the numerical marker, and you're ready to hire someone for a groups ministry. Would you be looking for someone different than you would look for the main campus? If you were looking for a small groups director or pastor on a main campus versus a satellite campus, would your hiring criteria look different?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. So I think who you're looking for, whether you're one campus and not multi-site, or whether you're multi-site and somewhere from 1 to 20 campuses or whatever that number is, I think it changes. I think at first, as you're forging the way and you need to build a ministry model and strategy, you've got to have a strong entrepreneurial leader who gets marketing and gets leadership development and all those things. If you're in a very sort of, you're not a micromanaging culture, that's who you need. As your campuses start to grow, you get more campuses. You start to maybe move more towards a higher control model, or if you're just one campus and you're just more of a high control culture anyway, then I think what you're going to need at that point is somebody who is more the shepherd and more of a someone who is okay being administrative. They've got a model that's been largely fleshed out. Now it's just about executing. So who it is that you need, the entrepreneurs might get a little bit bored and a little bit antsy at that environment, right, but they're going to be excited about maybe starting the next campus or whatever. So paying attention to that, I think, is critical.
And then as far as training, if you can touch upon training briefly, would you train differently do you use your centralized training typically across the campuses, or do you let campuses develop their own training for small group leaders?
So we do both, and we try to equip the campuses to be ready to do that. And some of it depends on again where that campus groups person is. So we do some all together trainings. I just did a strategic planning day last Thursday where we brought everybody together, and I walked them through a process of clarifying the vision for their campus. And we talked about, hey, there's some given vision. There are things that come from Saddleback, from groups, the way we've always done them. But there are some uniquenesses to our campus that necessitate us clarifying that vision on some level. So they fleshed out their vision. We walked through developing a plan and ended with a plan. And I told them at the end, here's my goal. I've done this today, and I'd love to do it once a year. But I'd also love for you at about the 6-month mark to lead your campus, your leaders, your strategic team through this as well. So it's about them owning the process of building a plan and training and developing people that we're coaching them on. But I don't want them to just rely on me constantly. I want them to get this and be able to do it and deliver it in their local context to make them the hero with their people.
Oh, that's great. So you raise them up and send them out, and hopefully they're doing the same in their environments. And then are they required to report back to you how it's going?
They are. So what we did this Thursday was we built these plans, and then we're having a report back day on in 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. So we started the plans as part of the planning, and I said, hey, finish these up, flesh them out. Let's get back together, and you're each going to have 10 to 15 minutes to share your plan. And that is partly accountability, but that's a small, tiny part. The real reason for that is I don't want to lose the best ideas from across all of our campuses. Right. So I told them, keep the cement wet until you've heard everybody else's plan. And then once you do, steal their best ideas, incorporate them into yours, and then say, hey, this is what we're going with. So they do it. There's an accountability piece, but there's also a sharing of collective wisdom that goes on as well.
I love that. I think that the collective wisdom piece is one of the benefits of a multi-site model, because you do have more people doing similar ministry, but doing it maybe in a different way that you can learn from. So it's kind of a built-in lab right there, which is great.
Yes.
All right. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to share before we sign off?
Oh, no. You know what? Well, sure. Yeah. For one, I know we've talked about multi-site. I know it's easy to hear like 19 campuses or whatever and feel like, gosh, I don't know, my ministry's not the same or doesn't have the same impact. I grew up in churches of 200 or less. And I, until Chase Oaks, I'd never been in one that was multi-site. And I've never questioned the value of my ministry in any one of those contexts. So I think whether you're trying to figure this out as one campus, a small church, or whether you're wrestling with this whole multi-site thing, I just love pastors. I love the effort that people put in when we get to lobbies and other gatherings, just to see and to hear and to learn from people. It's just so amazing what God is doing across the country and around the world. And man, I just want to say to people who are listening, keep it up. Keep up the great. God is doing some remarkable things around the world. And just want to encourage them in that way.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Jason. So I hope our audience does take that encouragement. What we do matters to the kingdom, matters to your church, and matters to our own selves too, in our own development. So thank you for the work you're doing at Saddleback. Those guys are lucky to have you, are blessed to have you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me today. It's always fun to talk with you.
You can follow Jason on Twitter at Jason N. Williams. You can also interact with Jason on our Facebook group network page. If you have any questions to follow up, anything concrete, you can message him or find him there. And he's pretty active on that. He's also part of the Orange County Huddle with Saddleback and others. So if you're in that part of the country, you can connect with him, and he's making himself available. So feel free, take advantage of Jason. He has 19 campuses. He's not that busy. He's just hanging out.
I will always make time. So yeah, please do, if I can ever help.
All right. Well, thank you, Jason. God bless you and your ministry.
You too. Thanks, Carolyn.
Well, thanks for listening to Group Talk. If you like what you hear, please leave us a positive rating on iTunes, and that helps other small group ministry point leaders find us. And we'll see you next time. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Here to There, part of the Group Talk network of podcasts. If you like what you've heard, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. If you want to learn more, make sure you check out smallgroupnetwork.com for more resources.